Hey everybody, welcome to Stigma Busters monthly podcast. I'm Scott. I'm your co-host. Thank you again for joining us or listening in to from wherever you are. We're really grateful and honored to share this space with you, this safe space where we talk about all things recovery, access to resources, self-help, motivational tools. Today we're going to be talking about life in recovery and the key to our toolbox, where we store our tools and how we can utilize those tools once we have an understanding of having a key. So today I'm joined by Sarah Santos, Deshawn, and Crystal, which most of you all know. These are our recovery warriors from the Mid-Hudson region. Thank you all for joining us again. And just a reminder that everything that is shared, said, or stated on this podcast is the opinions, views, and lived experience with those participating and does not reflect or coincide with the agencies that we represent or that we're employed by, but are strictly solely based on our lived experience as a person that has identified themselves in recovery. Again, my name is Scott. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to dive right into it. So the first question I have for everybody, what what is your key to your toolbox? Right? We're going to kind of skip the whole conversation about a recovery toolbox where we have, reoccurrence or relapse prevention, we have supports, we have medications, we have harm reduction tools, all of the understanding of our disorders and our addictions. And then we close that box and we store them in a safe space. But now, how do we open that box? And is your box locked with a key? So who wants to jump right in?
I guess I'll start. I have a million things to say. So,
As
hi, everybody.
usual.
I'm Crystal. Thank you again for having me. As always, I am so honored to be here and to share this safe space with you guys. So, as I was just telling my friends here, this is my recovery month. So, I will be celebrating 8 years in recovery this month. And I feel along my way, I have gained so many valuable tools that I have placed in my toolbox. And along the way, I have found many different keys that unlock that toolbox. But I would like to, I guess, in the beginning, my first key really was acceptance.
Mm,
Um, Acceptance of who I had become, acceptance of the things that I had done without being shameful and feeling guilty, acceptance of other people that played a part in my life, right? That played a part on my journey, accepting that I cannot change them and I have to accept them for who they are and where they come from as well. That was a huge part of me accepting who I had become and where I wanted to go and how I wanted to continue to grow. So acceptance definitely was my first and foremost uh, key that I had attained, I would say.
Um, yeah, I'll just hop in, because I like what you said about just accepting others and their role. And I think that it folds pretty neatly into our previous discussion about like codependency and people pleasing. And so I think that a tool that was really helpful for me in the beginning was developing boundaries, like acknowledging, first of all, codependency, but developing boundaries, understanding you can love someone from afar, like what you said about, you can't necessarily change somebody. And I think that's an interesting, part of recovery is that I don't know if everyone else had this experience, but I had a really large friend group that got way smaller because the more boundaries, I wasn't as of service to people I considered friends, the more boundaried I became. And so I think that in and of itself, if I have like a master key, something that's locked and it's just me, that's like my boundaries. And that was really a first step for me to be able to step away from relationships that in which we just fed each other in ways that, weren't healthy for where I wanted to be and who I wanted to be at that time. And so I think those concepts kind of go pretty neatly together.
Couldn't have said it better, Sarah. And that, Scott and I were talking the other day about like, so who holds your key, right?
Mhm.
As the codependent girl, I never held my own key, like I always handed that key off to someone else and let them hold the keys to my happiness and the keys to my peace and the keys to my joy. Now being able to set those healthy boundaries, I get to hold my key.
Right.
And, like I've taken that control back and that power back. And that's like a very empowering place to be. So it's nice to recognize that as well.
Yeah. And that ties into the self-love piece too,
Yeah.
because again, going back to codependency and giving your keys away to other people or things, having boundaries is an act of self-love to me.
Yes.
And it's like an exercise, I still think that every day my journey of like loving and accepting myself is, it's a continuous non-linear process, but how I can protect that is with my boundaries and, exercising boundaries, even when the codependent part of me that still will always be there doesn't necessarily want to do it. And then afterward, I feel good. And so it's like, sometimes it can be hard, but then, I appreciate the fact that I took care of myself in that way. And that self-love, I think, is really important in the process too.
Yeah, I think when you identify that you need to set boundaries or redefine boundaries, that's the key to open the toolbox, that you have the tools to create those boundaries.
Mhm, mhm.
Absolutely.
And I think that's huge. If you don't identify that first, then the tools in the toolbox, you're picking out the screwdriver when you need a hammer, and you're picking out the hammer when you need a drill, and
Right.
you're scrambling around, which causes anxiety and frustration, and all leads to fear if you don't have that predetermined key.
And that goes back to what Crystal said of acceptance, right?
Right.
Accepting your circumstance, who you are, what you've done, what you've been around, that sort of is that assessment to understand, where to even move from.
And I like how you said, Scott, like picking the right key, right? So for the longest time, I was a victim.
Mhm.
I blamed everyone. Nothing was ever my fault. I do this because you did such and such to me, right? I never did anything wrong. It was everybody else. So I lived in that victim frame of mind and I self-pity, all of those things. And I graciously learned that my key to those things is gratitude. You can't feel gratitude and also feel sorry for yourself at the same time. So
Mm.
now I know when I get in those moments, I still have those moments when I'm like, woe is me. Like today is not fair. Why is all this happening to me? Right. I go back to gratitude and
Yes.
I look at all the things that I have to be grateful for today. And that is my key to get out of that mindset because we know where that mindset can take us now. Right. So having the key to get out of that, it's like such a beautiful thing. Like, whoa, I got this.
And I think that's another thing too of, why I love so much. I'm so glad that I found this field and ended up working in this field because I've never worked with people that like talk about gratitude as often as
Right.
people in recovery
Yeah.
do. And it's hard, it's not easy work that we do. It's difficult, it's triggering, there's a lot of vicarious trauma. And yet the people that I work with talk about gratitude more than any other field that I've ever worked in before. And I think also, that being of service is such a huge part of that too. Like something that definitely has helped my self-esteem over the past 2 years is being able to take my experiences and try to serve the community and be a person that I wish, maybe would have been around for me. And, it's a thing where people like perceive it as being so selfless, but I really don't see it that way because I get so much from being able to do that, to be of service to, particularly, I didn't live, I grew up in the Hudson Valley. I lived away for 10 years and came back. And that's when I got into this field. So to like return to the place where this all started for me and be able to try to better the lives of like people in my community makes me feel so thankful. And I remind myself of that too. I think service is such a huge part of just remembering every day why you're here. And
I agree with
honoring what
that.
brought you here,
Yes.
like it wasn't a social work degree that brought me here. Maybe ultimately I'll get one, but it wasn't. It was a very hard path of, a lot of difficulties. And so I feel
Absolutely. I
like,
say that all the time, Sarah. Like
yeah,
people ask me like, why do you do what you do? And what motivates you? I say all the time, I am just trying to be the person that I wish that I had when I was going through that, when I was struggling, when I was going through family court. I wish I had a me,
yeah,
so I just try to be that person.
right. Hey, Sean, it looked like maybe you had something to say.
No, I did. I just, you know, it for me, Sarah, what you said hit it's the service part for of when you're in recovery, and just like Crystal said, you wish I'm doing it because I wish I had a me when I was in your position, and it makes you grateful that you can be that person. Even if you didn't have that person, it makes you grateful that you can be that person for somebody else. And in return, they can be that person for somebody else.
Right.
It's a like gratitude and service together creates a domino effect. When they see that you're grateful for the work that you do, when they see that you're not doing it just I mean, the money is fine, but it's not about you didn't go to school for, like, you don't have a social worker degree, you don't have, like, you're not being forced to do this, you're doing this because it makes you feel good inside.
Right.
It gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment. So when they see that, that tends to create a domino effect, and they do so on and so forth. So service with gratitude go hand in hand, and that's why people like us do the things that we do.
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
just thinking about service, not to reiterate everything you said. Service is like one of the most important things in my life. And service is a key to my toolbox,
Mhm.
because when within the first few seconds, or when I'm getting ready to make a phone call, or to dive into a conversation to support someone, I have to have that key to my toolbox to make sure that, like Sarah said, my boundaries are set, that I accept who I am, that I am grateful for who I am and have the opportunity, and I may or may not have words of wisdom for that particular person, but I accept what I've been through and I use my lived experience, and that's really all I have to offer, is just giving back what someone freely gave to me.
Mm.
So we touched on it, and I know all of you pretty well, so I know your answer. This is probably more for the listeners, but have you made a copy of your keys and given them away? Like, can people access your toolbox without your permission? Right? If you give me a key to your house, I don't need to tell you that I'm coming in. I'm just going to open the door and walk right in. So my toolbox and is mine. I can share those tools or say, hey, this is the screwdriver that I use, or this is the self-care modality that I use. I can show it to you, and I can let you use it until you understand and find your own. But I'm not going to give you the key, because then you're going to take it. And that comes back to Sarah's boundaries. My key is my boundary as well. That, hey, here's my key, but I need it back.
Okay, so I have an
Absolutely.
interesting. Oh, we all have something to say.
Yeah.
For sure. Go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So alternatively, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it, because my mind immediately goes to one of the people that accepted me and showed me unconditional love, the kind of person that I strive to be. And I would say that she has a copy to my toolbox as another layer of protection for me. So she understands the different ways that I cope, the different tools that I use. Sometimes there's sometimes yoga, I'm just like, I'm not in the space for it, and I'm going to use a different tool. And maybe it's not a copy, but by being transparent around that, and with somebody that I knew through establishing boundaries, somebody that encouraged me to establish boundaries and knew it wasn't going to be manipulated. And actually, she's somebody that can help hold me accountable in living toward who like I want to be. And so I don't know that I necessarily am giving a copy of it, but part of the boundaries is identifying those safe people, those people that are going to lift you up, those people that you can discuss something with and say, you know, was I out of pocket here? Or, you know, I had a slip, whatever that it is, you know, and I think being able to identify those people is really helpful. Whether or not they have the key itself is something else, but I'll pass it over because everyone has something to say.
Go ahead, Deshaun.
I get what you're saying, about, you're not necessarily sure if it's giving a copy. I see it like this. Sometimes you need a spare key, and sometimes you may need to give a spare key to somebody, but that's where the boundaries come in.
Right. I like that.
That person knows that they can't just use your key anytime they feel like that. But if you've established that rapport, that trust, that boundary with them, is like, listen, you know how to get me back on track just in case. You know what I'm saying? Just in case I slip. So they in quote unquote, have that spare key to where it's just like, all right, I need to get back on track. This person knows how to get me back on track. Now, of course, like I said, boundaries. Of course, don't use, not to use my spare key. Not to do this, not to do that. But I trust you enough to have it. So there's nothing wrong with having your spare key, but with that spare key comes boundaries.
Yeah.
Crystal?
I would have to say that before I had a toolbox or a key, my life was just like an open book. And like, not even that my life was just an open book. I just gave everything away without people ever even having to earn it because I didn't value myself. Now that I value myself and I value the things in my toolbox and I hold the key, it's a treasure. And I need that. And the fact that I'm able to keep it myself, like I'm a little protective of it. I'm like the mama bear of it because it took a lot of hard work for me to get there. Right. However, everything that's in my toolbox, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share it with you. I'm happy to share my experiences with you. I'm happy to let you take a little sneak peek. But I'm going to close it and I'm going to lock it and I'm still going to keep it for me. Only because my self-worth, it took me so long to find that. It took me so long to understand how to love myself. And I'm not ready to give that away. I'm not ready to make a copy. Yeah. Maybe I have friends who will help me get there, but I'll still hold the key. But only because I feel like I really had to fight and I really had to work. And it's something that I value so, so much now. And, I hold that near and dear to my heart because I do value myself as a person. Once upon a time, I didn't value myself. I didn't value my life. I didn't value anything that I contained. And now I do. So it's like a precious gem.
Believe me when I tell you that is okay. That is okay. Like, there's only one person who in my life has a copy to that, like the copy of the key to my toolbox. And of course, like I said, I've established that boundary, but it took a lot to get me to that point. It took so much effort, heartache, blood, sweat, and literal tears to get me to that point to where I can trust that person enough to hold that key. So if you haven't even reached, that's okay. Right. That you got to be able to be okay with that and just be like, Monday it might happen, and if it doesn't, that's okay too.
And it begins. Everything we're talking about is just full circle, right? Accepting who we are and what we've been through is not who we are, but what we've been through. So we need to find ourselves so we can find our people. And once we find our people, build those relationships, like Deshaun said, through blood, sweat, and tears. Because it's trial by fire. Like I'm not gonna just give you my key of trust. You got to earn that trust.
By actual fire sometimes.
Actual fire.
Actual fire.
Listen, actual fire. And once we find our people, then we have the opportunity to implement the necessity to grow. And then through that growth, which will require change, like Crystal said, is
Painful.
we used to be this person. Well, change was necessary and we grew, and now we're someone completely different. I was having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and they were talking about things that we used to do in high school. I'm like, I don't need to talk about those things anymore.
Mhm.
Yet, listen, I have those memories. I lived them with you. But let's talk about right now. Let's talk about who we are today.
Mhm.
They no longer serve us. We don't have to live there anymore.
They're no longer my people.
Right.
Exactly.
They're no longer my
So
people, and that's
hard.
okay. It
Yeah.
hurts. Like Ray Deshawn said, that like it hurt. It took me a day or two to recognize that. I'm like, wow, I've outgrown the need for that relationship. It no longer serves me to allow to serve others, because I don't need to go that far back anymore. I need to be present in the moment and live and experience joy as Scott, and not the Scott from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
If acknowledging, like Scott said, acknowledging the Scott from 20 years ago is not helping the Scott today, you don't need it. You don't need it. If it's not help building the crystal up today, the crystal 10 years for ago, we don't, what do we need it for? All it's doing is holding us back, keeping us in the past when we're trying to move forward. We don't need that. We don't need the constant reminders of what we used to do, the things we used to do wrong, our failures. And that's another, when people constantly bring that stuff up, it's just like, I'm trying to move forward. You're holding me back. I can't be around you if you're going to hold me back.
Mhm.
So that's why we're just like, no, you go do what you got. I mean, I wish you the best. I wish you all the best, but I can't do this with you.
I love you from afar.
And it's in those moments, right? Like those moments of uncomfortability, right? And that's what they call the growing pains, because we're uncomfortable in those moments. We're stretching ourselves. We're pushing ourselves to do the hard thing. Those are the moments that we're growing the most. And when you can see on the other side of that, like, wow, I did that. I did that. I didn't want to do that. That wasn't comfortable. That wasn't easy. You know, I hate conflict. I hate it. When I have to have like even like a healthy conflict with someone, I'm like, oh, like I want to throw up. But I know when I do it, I'm growing, and I, you know, all the things, and then it's over and I realize I can survive through it. And, you know, then you just feel that much better and more accomplished about ourselves. And it's nice that I welcome those moments of uncomfortability now, and those moments of change, because I know that ultimately they're opportunities for growth. And
You know that feeling when you're like, I, over the past couple of years, especially as I mentioned, like I had a much larger friend group and it just became smaller the more I leaned into the path that I wanted to be on. And I was talking just last summer with one of my roommates, and I was like, I feel like I'm in this tunnel and I can see the top of it. And like right now, it's just because healing, in the age of like social media is like bubble baths and like all of this like beautiful, like, it's like all rose colored. And it's like, no, it's like, it's gnarly. You have uncomfortable conversations. You realize you've outgrown people. You suddenly have, thinking of a toolbox, these people I perceived to be friends that I realized weren't, right? Which I had conceived of this as the, using a hammer when you need a screwdriver sort of thing. I thought that there were people that were part of my toolbox. And then I realized that they were never a part of my toolbox. And all of a sudden, I had way less tools. And I realized, and I knew, and even just in 1 year, the new relationships that I've formed just since last summer, I lost a friend of like 10 years because of what we're talking about. And it was so hard. I didn't think that was going to happen, but I knew in that moment, as painful as it was, I was like, I know I'm right on the edge of something else that's better. And that's through the years of like working through all of this. But the social component is something, because boundaries have been so hard, that's really the past couple of years has been a big part of my journey, and like my recovery, as I, define it, is just losing a lot of relationships that I thought were going to be longer lasting, but I was people pleasing and giving everything away. So of course these relationships went on for 10 to 15 years. Why not? I thought there was all this other stuff, and it's like, oh shoot, it's just because I'm like literally, giving myself away to this person, and that's what this was founded on. And oof, that hurts, because it hurts on the level of the relationship, and then realizing what you did and how you know, that accountability piece of how you perpetuated it as well.
And you are not a failure because you changed out of it from the need of a relationship. You are actually a better person because you identified the need to change.
It's hard though.
It's so
I
hard.
literally have, I can count on one hand
Yeah.
the amount of close friends that
Mhm.
know the intimate moments of my life today.
Yeah, same.
And I mean, I
Me
just had
too.
one hand because I
Mhm.
can, but I honestly, it's probably two people
Right.
that know the intimate parts of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm happier now than when I had 10, 15, 30, hundreds of acquaintances that know
Mhm.
bits and pieces, but they didn't know my heart. They couldn't hear my soul, and they didn't understand the difficulties that I was having upstairs when I was in active addiction. So
Right.
life in recovery with these changes in the growth is actually better when we remove the unneeded areas such as relationships and
Mhm.
establishing boundaries and admitting that I'm powerless,
Right.
but I found a power that's better than anyone that I could give.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, when you're growing, you don't wear the same clothes. You can't fit the same shoes. Like you have when you're growing, things have to change. There,
Mhm.
Right.
like it just like you're not gonna you can't grow into a size 7 thinking you could still fit a size 5. Like you can't as you're growing, you will change. Your clothing will change. I
Yeah.
equate clothing to your people, like the people around you. As you grow physically, mentally, you know, you mature, you start to live, the people around you are going to change or just gonna transition out. Now, some will grow with you.
Yeah.
That's the stretchy pants and the
Don't bet
stretchy
on it
shirts
though.
and everything. Don't bet on it
That's
though.
Don't bet
But
on it.
that's the crazy thing, because when we meet people where we are at. But if we
Mhm,
are still growing, we are either going to outgrow them
Yeah.
absolutely.
and realize that we have to leave them where they are at
Yeah.
and continue to grow.
Mhm.
And that was a hard lesson for me because, you know, this recovery process, you know, I have my moments when I'm slow moving. You know, sometimes it's a little stagnant and you're just like kind of at the peak and you're just like right there for a while. And then I have these bursts when I just like go through these like crazy moments of growth and I'm like, then I'm on some other level, you know? And then I'm looking back and I'm like, hello, are y'all coming?
Mhm.
Like I'm over here now. And like now I realize that like people that I was like really close with early in my recovery and I thought they were my new besties and
Yeah.
my life's on track now. All these people are coming into my life because God's given me all the good people.
Right.
Well, that was cool in the moment, but
Mhm.
like that was year 2. Now
Right.
I'm here and like I kind of just had to leave them there, you
Yeah.
know, and it's like I'm sorry, but I just realized now like people are in our lives for seasons
Or a
and I'll
reason.
take that season for
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah.
And I will take a piece of that with me and they will be a piece of me forever. However, I need to keep it moving.
Yes.
I need to keep moving forward. I need to continue to grow. And so again, like back to acceptance,
Mhm.
accepting that that's just the way that life goes. And I can't be sad about every person that I have to leave behind. I have to be happy for myself that I'm continuing to grow and flourish and move forward. So that was like a huge thing when I learned that. I was like, wow, wait a minute.
Definitely. It's also about accepting that, you know, it's okay to leave them behind.
Yeah.
You know, we may feel a type of way about leaving them behind, and but it's okay. Hell, that might just be where they're happy at. And that's okay too. We
Yeah.
can't be mad at them for not wanting to be on the same level as us. We can't, if that's where they're happy, if they feel like that's where they want to stay, hey, more power to you. I have to move forward.
Yeah.
Love you. If you're happy here, I wish you the best. And I'm going to be up here while you're over there, but I need to be over here. If you're happy
Right.
over there, fine, cool. Hey, I need to go this way.
Yeah. Come on, Deshaun.
Love them from a distance.
Mhm.
It's
And I
okay.
think that's another really
And that's it. Like you could still somewhat be like friends, but you're going in a different direction than they are. You know,
Mhm.
you're going, and that's okay. Now, if they're mad at you for going in that direction, they were never truly your friends. You know. They were
Right.
never truly your friends. If they're hating on you, or if the emotions and stuff change because you're deciding to move forward, then you never needed them in your life anyway.
Right. And I think that's another beautiful thing about this community is the focus on growth and what an act of self-love that is, to be committed to growth. Because it is a constant, like you were saying, Crystal, 2 years in versus now, that's a whole new person because you've committed to growth, which a lot of people don't think about. And that brings me to that quote that Scott, that you had said or I don't know if it was Crystal or Deshawn, but if we work as hard at our recovery as we do our addiction, we'll be unstoppable.
Yes.
Again, that growth piece of it, the
Yes.
commitment to growth is an act of self-love. And that's what makes us unstoppable, because we're always growing despite how hard it is, because we know that the other option is also hard and is sucks for lack of a better word. So like, okay, I'm gonna choose this. It's gonna be hard as well, but it's gonna elevate me. And even just choosing that and being aware of it on the day-to-day, I think is a really important part of self-love, that you deserve to accept yourself, to take stock of maybe, where you've been at in the past year and where you can grow, and continue to do that, because it's a never ending. I love this man, he works in prisons with men. His name's Richie Reseda. He's an activist, and he said he's not interested in a healed community, because once you're healed, you're done. And so he likes to foster a healing community, because it's a process that's always happening.
Always evolving.
Yeah.
Listen to the vernacular on that, though. Like I would rather have worked with a healing community than a healed community. That says a lot, because a lot of people's journey to healing is never ending. So
exactly.
The work is ongoing. It's always going to continue. Versus if you're healed, or if you feel like you're healed, hey, there's nothing to do for you.
Yeah. I mean, life is always coming at us, so it's kind of,
Has anybody ever truly healed?
For how long can you be healed?
This is a little
thing
that I keep by my desk. It's Bob Marley, and it says, "You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have." And that is so true, right? I love this. It literally stays here every day. And it's the same thing. Like, we don't realize or give ourselves enough credit for the things that we do every day, or the things that we've been through, or, like the traumas in our past. Like, if we really sat down and thought about all the trauma that we've been through, like, we should give ourselves a lot more credit, and a lot of people would be in a different place. But like Sarah was saying, like, our community of people, the way that we discuss things, the way that we talk about ourselves, in self-love, in gratitude, in acceptance of others, in a non-judgmental, safe space. What other community of people have that? Like, again, I'm so grateful for once upon a time being an addict, because I've been able to heal and go into treatment facilities and press pause on life in order to take that time to figure myself out, to figure out, like, what are the things that trigger me, right? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? What other community of people does that? Addicts. We get to do that. There's no other community of people that gets to say, like, oh, I'm going to go to treatment for 28 days and like figure some shit out real quick. Right? Like, there's no other community of people that gets to do that except for us. So the fact that I've been able to do that multiple times, I've had some time to like figure some stuff out, and, know how many people say, I'm grateful that I got to go to rehab. Not many, really. But if you look at it, who else gets to say, like, hold up, I need to like take 6 months and go to long-term treatment so I can get my shit back together. Like, that's something to be grateful for.
Absolutely. Well, that really covers a lot of different keys, and making sure that we have keys, and covered a bunch of tools that we have in our toolbox. And I think it really just all stems from, accepting, like Crystal just mentioned, that the trauma occurred. Can't change that. It's unchangeable. It occurred. It's in the past. But what you can change is your acceptance of that and seeking out support from any recovery warrior in any community, wherever you are, and seeking guidance on identifying, your powerlessness, and then obtaining a power that can help you achieve the joy and happiness that comes from a life in recovery. Um, it's not easy, but from my understanding, my experience, I would do it all over again. Because right now, as I sit here, I don't even want to complain. And even if I could, I don't even want to. Because what's happening in my personal life, my professional life, just what's happening in life is much better than it was when I was using. Or even when I wasn't using and I was dry and I had no program because I was just as miserable. I have less friends now than I ever had in my life. But I have more in my life today than I ever have had by giving up the things that didn't really serve me. So life in recovery can look 10 different ways, 100,000 different ways. But the main object is to make sure that you identify the key that can open a toolbox for the first time so you can learn the tools and keep placing them in your toolbox so you can come back to them later today, in 10 minutes, or tomorrow, so life in recovery can be sustainable. Because even though reoccurrences or relapses are part of some stories, I'm going to let you know, they don't have to be, because your next reoccurrence could end your life. And happiness and joy can only really come truly from being in recovery, however you see that to be. So just be your most authentic self, love yourself ferociously on purpose, and make sure that you have a key that can access your tools when the time calls for them. I want to thank you all for joining us again for our monthly podcast. Stay tuned for next month as we dive further and further into life and recovery and different tools and categories to help us all live and thrive in recovery. My name's Scott. I love myself ferociously on purpose today.
My name's Sarah. I love myself ferociously on purpose today.
My name is Deshaun, and I love myself on purpose today.
My name's Crystal. Thank you again for having me. I can't wait to see you guys next month, and I love myself ferociously on purpose today. Stay tuned for what's next.
Peace and love, everybody. Abundant blessings.